Nigeria's trade orientation is undergoing a notable shift, with exports to African countries almost doubling in the third quarter of 2025. New data shows that Nigeria's exports to the continent rose by 97.16% year-on-year to 4.9 trillion naira, up from 2.49 trillion naira recorded in the same period of 2024. Underscoring a growing emphasis on intra-Africa trade and emerging market partnership. Welcome to Business Point, where we extract the Nigerian economy and the government policies. I am Kike Lomo Okeri. Foreign trade figures released by the National Bureau of Statistics indicate that the surge in African bond exports coincide with the expanding trade volume with key BRICS economies, particularly China and Brazil. During the period under review, Nigeria's exports to China rose sharply by 230.40% to 2.26 trillion naira compared to 683.74 billion naira a year earlier. Exports to Brazil also posted solid growth, increasing by 19.58% to 446.76 billion naira from 373.61 billion naira in the third quarter of 2024. BRICS, comprising Brazil, Russia, India, and China, is widely regarded as an alternative economic bloc to Western-dominated global system. Nigeria's rising trade with members of the group reflects a broader strategy of diversifying export destination and reducing exposure to traditional markets facing growing trade friction. In contrast, exports to some long-standing partners declined sharply. Shipments to India fell by 52.83%, dropping from 1.19 trillion naira to 560.76 billion naira year-on-year. Trade with the United States suffered an even steeper contraction, declining by 55.97% to 743.63 billion naira from 1.69 trillion naira in the corresponding quarter of 2024. Additionally, data from the United States Census Bureau reinforced this downward trend, showing that between January and September 2025, U.S. imports to Nigeria goods fell by $552.7 million from $4.68 million in the same period of 2024 to $4.12 billion. Earlier figures also shows a decline in U.S. import from Nigeria between January and May 2025, a development that followed the imposition of 14% tariff on Nigerian exports by the United States, further straining bilateral trade relations and rising concern about the future of the preferential trade agreement. Industry stakeholders say the latest trade figures point to a deliberate pivot by Nigerian manufacturers and exports towards alternative markets. The leadership of the Manufacturer Association of Nigeria has indicated that higher tariff, rising compliance costs, currency volatility, and longer shipping timeline have reduced the attractiveness of the U.S. market. As a result, exporters are increasingly targeting BRICS countries and African markets, where trade barriers are lower and bilateral arrangements are more accommodating to Nigerian goods, including manufactured products, agricultural produce, and semi-produced processed commodities. The Lagos State Chamber of Commerce and Industry has also linked the decline in exports to United States to escalating tariff measures, noting that they have weakened the competitiveness of Nigerian exports such as oil and agricultural products. The Chamber observes that exporters are now pursuing what it describes as strategic diversification, expanding trade ties with emerging markets including BRICS countries, Turkey, and United Arab Emirates, while exploring alternative to dollar-dependent trade system. Business leaders have urged federal government to intensify engagement with partners to resolve trade barriers while accelerating efforts to deepen intra-Africa trade under the African Continental Free Area. They also emphasized the need to broaden Nigerian export base by investing in non-oil sector such as digital service, creative industry, and green technologies, alongside boosting crude oil production to cushion potential revenue shortfalls. Although Nigeria continues to trade significantly with the United States and Europe, the latest data suggests a gradual but clear reorientation of countries' global trade footprint towards African and other emerging markets. The surge in exports to Africa and BRICS countries reflects a structural adjustment in Nigeria's trade strategies, driven by global protectionism and shifting market dynamics. As traditional Western market becomes less predictable due to tariff and policy uncertainties, Nigerian exports are responding pragmatically by expanding into region that offers growing demand and fewer trade barriers. If sustained, these pivots could strengthen regional integration, reduce external vulnerability, and support Nigeria's long-term goal of export diversification beyond oil. Nigerian non-oil exports rose to an unprecedented 9.2 trillion naira in the first 9 months of 2025, representing a 48% increase. The 6.2 trillion naira recorded over the same period in 2024. The figure released in the foreign trade in the goods statistics by the National Bureau of Statistics marks the strongest non-oil export performance since the agency began publishing consistent trade data in 2015. The surge reflects the lasting impact of 2023 naira devaluation, which continued to reshape Nigeria's external trade profile. A weaker currency has lifted export earnings in naira terms while improving the price competitiveness and Nigeria's non-oil products in international markets. Since the currency adjustment in mid-2023, non-oil exports has expanded rapidly, highlighting how exchange rate realignment can unlock export potential even as structural constraints persist. For context, Nigeria's total non-oil export for the entire 2023 stood at 3.1 trillion naira. By comparison, the first 9 months of 2025 alone have already tripled that figure. Quarterly data further illustrates the pace of growth. In the third quarter of 2025, non-oil exports reached 2.996 trillion naira, up from 2.5 trillion naira in the corresponding period of 2024. This compares sharply with 683 billion naira in the third quarter of 2023 and 438 billion naira in the second quarter of 2022, underscoring the scale and the speed of the recent expansion. A breakdown of the monthly performance shows how export values have been repriced under the new exchange rate environment. Non-oil exports stood at 1.23 trillion naira in July 2025, eased by 0.88 trillion naira in August 2025, and rose slightly to 0.89 trillion naira in September. On average, Nigeria is now generating close to 1 trillion naira per month in non-oil export receipts, a level that was largely unattainable under the previous exchange rate regime. However, because the NBS trade statistics are reported in naira terms, part of this growth reflects currency depreciation effect, meaning export values have risen faster than underlying export volume in some segments. Despite the record performance, non-oil remains secondary within Nigerian overall export mix. In the third quarter of 2025, non-oil goods accounted for about 12 to 14% of total exports on a monthly basis, while crude oil, refined petroleum products, and natural gas continued to dominate export earnings. This structure leaves Nigerian foreign exchange inflow heavily exposed to fluctuation in global oil price, indicating that non-oil exports, though growing, have not yet become a decisive buffer for the balance of the payments. The composition of the non-oil exports suggests that growth is concentrated in capital-intensive and energy-related industries rather than broader-based manufacturing. NBS data shows that in the third quarter of 2025, products of the chemical and allied industry generated 845 billion naira, while prepared foodstuff, beverages, spirit, and tobacco contributed 692 billion naira. Vehicles, aircraft, and parts, along with vessel and floating structures, accounted for 550.8 billion naira, while vegetable products generated 214.5 billion naira. By sector, agricultural exports stood at 786.6 billion naira, raw material exports reached 1.0 trillion naira, and solid mineral exports amounted to 100.8 billion naira. Manufactured goods export total 2.0 trillion naira in the quarter, with energy-related manufactured exports contributing about 91 billion naira. The data also points to persistent imbalance in Nigerian industry trade. While manufactured exports reached 2 trillion naira in the third quarter of 2025, Nigeria imported manufactured goods worth 4.75 trillion naira over the same period. These gaps highlight the country's continued dependence on foreign industry products and the limited depth of the domestic manufacturing. Most manufactured exports remain concentrated in fertilizer, refined petroleum products, petrochemicals, and heavy industrial items rather than consumers' goods or light manufacturing, constraining the breadth and the resilience of diversification. Overall, the surge in the non-oil exports confirms that Nigerian exporters are responding to the improved price incentives created by the exchange rate reforms. It also demonstrates that under the right macroeconomic condition, Nigeria has the capacity to generate trillion naira monthly export receipts outside the oil sector. Fresh industry data has revealed a widening gap between enrollment and actual contribution under the Nigerian Personal Pension Plan, with more than 9 months of every 10 registered accounts remaining unfunded despite sustained efforts to deepen pension coverage in informal sector. The Personal Pension Plan, formerly known as Micro Pension Scheme, was designed to draw informal sector workers into the contributory pension system. However, figures from the National Pension Commission third quarter 2025 report shows that participation has likely been nominal. As of 30th of September 2025, a total of 206,917 retirement saving accounts has been registered under the scheme, but only 15,677 accounts, representing 7.6%, received contribution during the quarter. The remaining 191,240 accounts, equivalent to 92.4%, recorded non-funding activities. This week contribution patterns contrast sharply with the broader performance of Nigerian pension industry, which continued to expand strongly in the same period. Total pension assets rose by 5.93% to 26.09 trillion naira as of the end of September 2025, up from 24.63 trillion naira in June, supported by robust investment return in equities and government securities, as well as improved compliance, particularly in the formal private sector. A closer breakdown of the Personal Pension Plan data shows wide disparities among pension fund administrators. Access which accounts for the largest share of the registered PPP accounts at 107,547, recorded just 2,129 funded accounts, translating to roughly 2% funding and leaving a large volume of dormant accounts. Stanbic IBTC also recorded a high level of inactive with 33,340 unfunded accounts, representing about 92% of its total. Other administrators with notable high unfunded ratio include Guaranty Trust Bank at 96%, NLPC PFA at 95%, and Trust Fund Pension at 94%. In contrast, a small number of PFAs demonstrated relatively stronger engagement. Fidelity Pension Managers recorded 1,667 funded accounts out of 1,887 registered, leaving only 12% unfunded. FCMB Pension and Veritas Galvez also posted comparatively low unfunded ratio of 69% and 71% respectively, suggesting more active contributors' participation. The regulators acknowledge that the figure highlights a critical structural challenge facing the personal pension plans. While registration numbers are rising, the dominance of unfunded accounts is limiting assets accumulation under the scheme and weakening its long-term sustainability. The data point to the need for targeted intervention, including improving contributors' education, better incentive structure, and simplified remittance channels to encourage consistent funding. In contrast to the struggles in the formal sector, the overall pension industry recorded strong inflow during the quarter. Total pension contribution in the third quarter of 2025 amounted to 503.19 billion naira, reflecting solid remittance compliance across both public and private sector. Private sector contribution surged by 67.3% to 338.65 billion naira from 202.47 billion naira in the previous quarter, indicating expanded coverage, improved enforcement, and possibly higher employment-related remittance. Beyond asset growth, the pension system continued to deliver broader social benefit during the third quarter 2025. All right, let's take a quick short break now. We'll be right back. Don't go away. Stay with us. Welcome back. If you just joined us, it's Business Point on Global Television, where we x-ray the Nigerian economy and the government policies. Nigerian downstream fuel market is set for another price adjustment as the Dangote Petroleum Refinery moves to translate its latest January price cut into lower pump price nationwide. From Tuesday, partners filling station led by MRS are expected to begin selling petrol at 739 naira per litre, with other retail partners set to follow. The new pump price comes just 2 days after the refinery reduced its export price of petrol from 828 to 699 naira per litre, a move aimed at easing fuel costs and consumers and testing the effectiveness of the recent market reform. The management of the Dangote Group says the decision is designed to ensure that reduction at the January level are reflected at the retail end, where consumers often see little or no relief. At a press briefing at Lekki Refinery, Aliko Dangote expressed concern that despite falling gantry price, some marketers routinely keep pump price elevated, undermining the intended benefit of price reduction. He indicated that MRS station would take the lead in implementing the 739 naira per litre price, beginning in Lagos, while other partners will align shortly after. Dangote also warns that vested interest within the fuel distribution chain we are working to resist price reduction. He alleged that certain marketers has been encouraged to maintain high pump price in order to frustrate the impact of lower refinery price. According to him, the refinery will deploy all available commercial and logistic tools to ensure that the new price regime takes effect across the market. The refinery strategies include opening up direct access to independent marketers willing to lift volume. Dangote says marketers capable of purchasing at least 10 trucks could buy directly from the refinery at 699 naira per litre gantry price. He noted that within 1 to 10 days, distribution challenges will ease and supply stabilize enough to enforce the lower retail price, particularly through the peak December and January demand period. All right, this is where we'll call it a wrap on Business Point today. Join me again tomorrow on Global Television Channel 365 on DSTV and 276 on Star Times. To stay connected, kindly follow us on all our social media platforms using @Global TV NG. Till I come your way again, I am Kike Lomo Okeri. I celebrate you all.